For years, I thought that infidelity was a tragedy that happened to someone else. It was something that happened in messy relationships, to people who stopped caring or paying attention. Not to me. Not in my marriage. But as I reflect on it now, I see things more clearly. The silence that had crept into our home had been there for months, maybe even longer. It wasn't caused by arguments or harsh words, it wasn't some overt war of emotions. It was a deeper kind of absence, like the slow erosion of something once vibrant, the dull ache of a relationship that had quietly started to wither. It wasn't that I didn't care. No, I did. I cared a lot. I always cared. But somewhere along the way, we lost each other. And I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know how to fight for something that seemed so broken and fragile. Maybe I had already given up without even realizing it, but I kept pushing forward, trying to make things work, trying to hold on to a marriage that was no longer anything more than an echo of what it once was. And then, the truth hit me like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just the silence anymore, it was the feeling that I was living with a stranger. A stranger who, just like me, seemed too tired to fight for the love we had once shared. The evidence I never wanted to find. I didn't want to see it, didn't want to admit it. But I knew that something had been off for months. The late nights at work. The constant distractions. The distance. We used to talk. We used to spend time together. We used to share our thoughts and dreams. But now, it was as if we were simply existing in the same space, sharing the same home, but living entirely separate lives. I had heard the whispers, the little things, the small clues that seemed out of place. But I never allowed myself to believe them. I didn't want to believe that my husband, the person I had committed my life to, would do something like that. But in the deepest corners of my mind, I knew it was coming. I knew something was wrong. The phone call, the message, the face that showed nothing but indifference, everything was falling apart around me, piece by piece. One day, it happened. I was rushing to get out of the house and in my hurry, I grabbed the wrong phone. His phone. It was a mistake, a simple, innocent mistake. But as I glanced at the screen, my heart dropped. A message popped up, just for a moment, before he snatched the phone away from my hands. I only caught a few words, but it was enough to shatter everything I thought I knew. I saw the name. And I saw the message. Counting down the minutes till we meet. Those words hit me like a ton of bricks. The feeling of betrayal was overwhelming. I froze, not knowing what to do, what to say. He had already grabbed the phone, his hand shaking as he stuffed it into his pocket. But the damage had already been done. I knew. I knew exactly what was happening. I knew why he had been distant. I knew why he had stopped being present. I knew why there had been so many late nights and so many unexplained absences. It wasn't just me, he had someone else. And worse than that, it was my sister. My own sister. I had always been close to her. She was someone I trusted more than anyone. We shared everything. Our childhood secrets, our triumphs, our heartaches. She was supposed to be my confidant, my best friend. But in that moment, I realized that she had betrayed me in the worst possible way. She had stolen something from me that could never be replaced. I stood there, staring at the door where my husband had just walked out, my mind racing with disbelief. How could this be real? How could my sister and my husband be involved in something like this? The betrayal was more than I could bear. I didn't even know where to start. I didn't confront him immediately. Maybe I was waiting for him to come clean. Maybe I thought he would feel guilty enough to admit the truth. I wasn't sure. But what I did know was that it wasn't just about the affair. It wasn't just about the betrayal of my husband. It was about the fact that my sister, the person I loved and trusted, had become an active participant in this mess. She was part of the lie, part of the deceit. The late-night phone calls. The hushed whispers at family gatherings. I had seen it all, but I had refused to acknowledge it. I had allowed myself to believe the best in them. I had ignored the warning signs because I didn't want to face the truth. But now, there was no denying it. It was all real. And it hurt more than anything I had ever experienced. A few days later, after a minor disagreement, I found myself standing in the living room, watching my husband pack his suitcase. His actions were calm, almost mechanical, as if he had been planning this moment for some time. I wanted to scream. I wanted to beg him to stay, to fix this, to make it right. But there was nothing left to say. "You're really leaving? You're really walking away from everything we built?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and sadness. He didn't respond at first. He just kept packing, zipping his suitcase closed with a soft click. And then, I said it. "You'll regret this when she leaves you, too." He stopped for a moment, his back to me. His shoulders tensed, and I thought I saw a flicker of guilt cross his face. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by cold indifference. He didn't say a word. He simply grabbed his bag and walked out of the door. And then, she came. Just minutes after my husband's car screeched away, I saw another car pull into the driveway. It was her. My sister. The person who had torn apart my world, who had betrayed me in the most unimaginable way. She stepped out of her car, wearing a look of calm composure, as if nothing had happened. She didn't even seem fazed by what she had just done. She walked up to me, almost casually, as if she had done nothing wrong. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The tears were welling up in my eyes, but I refused to let her see my weakness. She looked at me, her expression unreadable. "Just wanted to let you know I've won," she said, as if it were a game. No hard feelings. He needed someone who listens. And then, without so much as a glance back, she turned and walked back to her car, driving away without a single word of apology or remorse. I stood there in shock, watching her go. My sister, the person I had trusted more than anyone, had just left me standing there with nothing but the weight of betrayal on my shoulders. I felt hollow, empty, as though everything that had once mattered had been stripped away. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in place, unable to comprehend the events that had just unfolded. It was as if the world had stopped turning, and I was left behind, spinning in a whirlwind of emotions. That night, I found myself sitting on the curb outside my house, wearing nothing but my pajama pants, staring at the empty street in front of me. The pain was unbearable. The weight of the betrayal was crushing. I felt as though I was suffocating, drowning in the overwhelming flood of emotions. In my frustration, I began tossing bottles into the trash, just to hear them break. The sound was somehow cathartic, almost like the breaking of my own heart. I didn't know when it started, but before I knew it, I was sobbing. Loudly. Uncontrollably. And then, like a small miracle, my neighbor appeared. She didn't ask questions. She didn't try to fix things. She just sat down beside me, handing me a plate of pasta, garlic bread, and brownies. She didn't say anything, she just let me cry. And for the first time in days, I didn't feel so alone. She listened, and that made all the difference. In her presence, I felt a small flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could move past this. Maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to rebuild my life. As I sat there, pouring my heart out to her, I realized something. Yes, my husband had cheated. Yes, my sister had betrayed me. But I wasn't blameless either. I had shut down emotionally long before any of this happened. I had allowed myself to stay in a marriage that was no longer filled with love. I had stayed out of convenience, out of fear, out of a need to control the situation. But I hadn't stayed because I loved him. And that realization hit me hard. The truth was, I had been holding on to the past, afraid to let go, afraid to face the future. But now, I knew that I had to let go. I had to reclaim my life. The next morning, I did something I had never thought I would do. I called my husband and told him to come collect his things. I told him that our marriage was over and that there was no going back. I blocked his number and changed the locks. And then, I called my sister. I told her, in no uncertain terms, that our relationship was finished. No more pretending, no more lies. She had crossed a line that I could never forgive. When I hung up the phone, something inside me shifted. I felt a sense of liberation that I hadn't felt in months. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving the betrayal. I was taking charge of my life. I wasn't looking back anymore. I wasn't clinging to a past that no longer served me. I was moving forward. And I was doing it for me. As the days passed, I began to rebuild. Slowly, piece by piece. I started to reconnect with myself, with who I was before the marriage, before the betrayal. I started to see that I was worthy of more than what I had settled for. And in that journey of self-discovery, I found a freedom I had never known. A freedom that came from within. I wasn't just healing. I was thriving. The weeks that followed felt like a slow and painful reawakening. At first, it was hard to even look in the mirror without feeling the weight of the betrayal hanging over me. The woman who had once been so full of love and hope had been shattered, but she wasn't gone. She was still there, buried deep inside, waiting to rise again. In the days following my decision to take control of my life, I began to focus on the small, everyday things that I had neglected for so long. I started by cleaning out the closet. It wasn't just a physical task, it was symbolic. Every item I discarded, every piece of clothing I removed from the shelves, was a step closer to letting go of the past. I threw out things that no longer served me, old mementos, photographs, gifts that had once meant something but now only reminded me of the pain. I spent my mornings jogging around the neighborhood, something I hadn't done in years. The cool morning air was refreshing, and with each step, I felt stronger. The rhythmic pounding of my feet on the pavement became a meditation of sorts, helping me clear my mind. I'd always loved running, but it had been something I had let slip away as the weight of my marriage had slowly suffocated my passion. I also started to re-engage with my friends, something I had pushed aside during my marriage. They had been patient with me, understanding that I had been wrapped up in my own world. But now, I was back. I reached out to them, and soon enough, I was invited to dinners, movie nights, and casual catch-ups. It felt good to laugh again, to talk about something other than the mess I had just been through. One night, I had dinner with my old friend, Claire. We sat at a cozy Italian restaurant, sharing pasta and bread as if no time had passed. I was able to tell her about the things that had been weighing on my heart, and she listened, offering nothing but support and validation. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of the world alone. "I'm proud of you," she said, after I told her about the phone call to my husband and sister. "You're taking back your life. That's something not many people can do. You've had your heart broken, but now you get to heal on your own terms." Her words stuck with me more than I ever expected them to. Healing on my own terms. It was empowering to realize that I was the one who held the power over my future, and it was up to me to decide how I would move forward. The more time passed, the more I realized that I was becoming someone new, someone I could finally be proud of. I started setting boundaries with the people in my life, not just with my ex-husband and sister, but also with friends and family. I learned to say no when I needed to, and for the first time in a long while, I stopped apologizing for taking care of myself. It was okay to put myself first. Months passed, and life began to look different. I found a new rhythm, a new routine. I started exploring hobbies that I had neglected for years, like painting and writing. I spent more time in nature, taking long walks through parks and forests. I was reconnecting with the parts of myself that had been overshadowed by years of emotional neglect. Then, one day, I received a message from my ex-husband. It had been months since I'd spoken to him. I had blocked his number, changed my locks, and had done everything I could to close that chapter of my life. But this message felt different. It wasn't an apology or a plea for reconciliation, it was something more neutral, more calculated. He said he wanted to talk. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I spent hours weighing my options. I thought about all the times I had tried to make him listen, to get him to understand. I thought about the hurt, the pain, and the way he had abandoned me in favor of my sister. But I also thought about how far I had come. I had rebuilt my life. I had found my own strength. I eventually responded. But I wasn't responding as a wife, as someone hoping for answers. I was responding as a woman who had moved on, who had finally found her peace. I don't think we have anything left to say, I wrote. I've moved on. I hope you do the same. It wasn't bitter. It wasn't angry. It was simply the truth. He never responded after that. And in that silence, I found something I hadn't expected, closure. I had said everything I needed to say, and now I could walk away without looking back. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. A year after the breakup, I received an invitation to my sister's wedding. It was strange, this sense of being invited back into a world that no longer felt like mine. I wasn't sure if I should go. Part of me felt like it was the right thing to do, to show up and face the people who had hurt me, to finally heal from the wounds they had inflicted. The other part of me, the part that had found peace and freedom in letting go, didn't want to be part of the mess anymore. But I decided to go. Not because I wanted closure or because I needed answers, but because I was stronger now. I had nothing to prove. I had already moved on, and I wanted to show myself, more than anything, that I had the power to move forward without carrying the weight of the past with me. When I arrived at the wedding, I was calm. I was composed. I looked beautiful in a dress that made me feel confident, like the woman I was becoming. My sister saw me from across the room and froze. For a split second, I saw the guilt flush across her face. But I didn't need her to apologize. I didn't need her to beg for forgiveness. I had already forgiven her in my own way. The wedding was awkward, as expected. I didn't sit with her or my ex-husband, but I didn't avoid them either. I was polite, I was kind, but I didn't pretend. I had no interest in pretending that everything was okay when it wasn't. But it didn't matter anymore. I had reclaimed my power. I had walked through the fire and come out stronger on the other side. As the evening wore on, I found myself talking to other guests, laughing and enjoying myself. I wasn't burdened by the past. I wasn't defined by the betrayal. I was just me, free, confident, and in control of my own destiny. By the time the wedding ended, I knew I had made the right choice. I was no longer weighed down by resentment or anger. I was no longer shackled by the past. I had finally found peace, not because of the apology I had wanted, but because of the strength I had found within myself. It wasn't easy. It wasn't quick. But it was real. I had learned that sometimes, the hardest part isn't letting go of someone else, it's letting go of the parts of yourself that you thought were tied to them. I had let go of the woman who was dependent, the woman who stayed in a broken marriage out of fear of being alone. And in letting her go, I found the woman I was meant to be. A woman who no longer needed anyone's approval. A woman who had learned to trust herself again. A woman who had reclaimed her life. And as I walked away from that wedding, I knew that this was just the beginning of my new life. The past was behind me, and the future was mine to create.